Namaskar Bharat. For the first time ever, we are hosting an MBA Times Fair event specifically tailored towards the candidates from India. But if you are joining from any other part of the world, feel free to stay because the frameworks can still be useful to you in creating an impactful application. The series of live stream that we'll go through from today onwards will consist less of marketing like other MBA fairs do, but more of quality content that focuses on completing important sections of your MBA applications like resume, essays, letters of recommendation, etc. Depending on the availability, we will dive deeper into the application of what we learn here by looking at the samples, and we'll come to that later. So let's get to it and not waste any time. And today we'll be discussing Stanford's Graduate School of Business. This is where you will be if you manage to get in, and your odds are going to go up if you stay and watch the entire session till the end. And wait for a little surprise before we start looking at the samples. So let's put this image in the background to keep you inspired. Let's look at the agenda for the day then. A couple of things before we look at the agenda. First, you can scan this QR code that will take you to the WhatsApp group. This WhatsApp group will serve as a medium for you to ask any questions while the session goes on. And towards the end, when we will have the live Q&A session, you can get those answered live. If you have questions later also, the group can serve as a medium to have those answered later. And it also eliminates one of the biggest problems that many people have had in the webinars, that their questions are not getting answered, and they really have so many of those. So we have solved this problem for you. Let's look at the agenda now. We'll look at what values define the school and the class profile first, which will help you understand the statistical requirements and personality checks for the school that you're applying to. In this case, this is Stanford. So how exactly do you fit into the class, not just as a candidate with certain GMAT score or certain GRE score, but someone with a personality that Stanford is also looking for. Next, we will look at the essays and the resume, which are obviously the backbone of your application. So in a way, if you think about this, the values and the class profile are basically the foundation on the basis of which your entire application will be completed. And essays and resume are like the backbone of the application, which can keep the application strong. So foundation and the structure, that's basically the idea. We'll look at the LOR samples. These will be shared with you, and I will give you the tips in the webinar. And goes without saying that you will not be the one writing the LORs. So you can share the sample with someone else who will be writing this LOR for you, like your supervisor or someone else you'll be taking as the recommender. It will also be shared in the same Q&A group for which the QR code is still up for scanning. And we'll keep going on with the webinar. So the live stream recording will be kept safe for you for a couple of hours. So that should give you some, room to breathe. If not, you can always come back to this later on. And we'll also share this at the end of the webinar, so you don't have to worry about this. Let's move on because we are on a time crunch and we should look at the class profile and the values. So the motto of Stanford: change lives, change organizations, and change the world. Change is what defines Stanford. Anything that has to do with change, how exactly are you changing lives? How exactly are you touching their souls? And how are you influencing their lives is what Stanford likes to have in its candidates. People who are changing their organization in some capacity or the other, anything positive. Changing the world, obviously, if you had done that, there is a possibility that you may not be applying to Stanford, but still someone who has this willingness to change the world sometime in the future. So that's Stanford. Now, looking at the statistical fit, and we'll look more into the values in a couple of seconds. But before that, let's look at the class profile. So the size is 434, which is basically decent. I wouldn't say it's too big. I wouldn't say it's too small. A decent number of alumni each year. The GRE average is really the biggest factor here, which is at 164 for quant, 164 for verbal. That's the average. And that adds up to 328. So like I said, this webinar is more specific towards Indians. So for Indians, I would recommend people who are from overrepresented pool according to the admissions team, who believes that Indians are all overrepresented, not a diverse set of people who have different experiences. But are belonging to that pool. So in that situation, I would say like that you should have at least 4 to 6 points above the average, which will give you an edge. So around like 332 to 334, which is basically like the 99th percentile. Same goes for the GMAT average. You can see that the GMAT average for the legacy edition is at 738. So legacy is getting phased out, and the focus edition is at 689. For the Indian candidates, I would recommend having at least 30 points above the class average. And the easier way to remember this is like just keep 99th percentile as your bar. Anything above that is fine. International students are at 38%. I don't know what the split is between the purely international students and dual citizens. So dual citizens are some people who are actually American citizens, but they also hold citizenships of other countries. So they also get pulled into the international candidates, even if they're not ever transferred or like even traveled to the country that they have this association with. Some cases I've read. So I don't know what the split is, but it's a mix of both. And most schools actually report the mix of both. It's highly unlikely some schools are reporting it separately. I think Tuck and Wharton have reported that separately, if I remember that correctly, because Wharton I confirmed myself, and Tuck has it on their class profile. The work experience average is at 5 years, anywhere between 3 to 8 years or 3 to 7 years, not even eight. 3 to 7 years should be a decent window for you to be in. 5 years is the average, mostly because if you're in that bracket, you're kind of ready for an MBA. So that's kind of like the target to be, but like anywhere between 3 to 7 years is the good age bracket to be in for, sorry, experience bracket to be in for the MBA admissions. Moving on, we'll be looking at the keywords and the values that define Stanford more specifically, because this is how you brainstorm the stories. Not many people will tell you this, but here are the keywords. So as you can see, there are lots of keywords here, but what I want you to focus on is the moment I go to one keyword after the other, what are the stories that will pop up in your head in your professional life, in your personal life, or even in your former academic life when you were completing your bachelor's degree or something? What exactly are the stories that are popping up when I speak about a particular keyword and explain what that keyword means? So that's how you brainstorm things. So whenever you're looking at a particular keyword, brainstorm the stories and dive deeper into things. So that's my suggestion. And let's look at the keyword. So the first keyword on the top right side is change maker. Obviously, we started with the idea of change, but what kind of a change maker are you? Are you someone who is just like, influencing people into doing certain things, or are you someone who is actually able to articulate something that has not been done before, and you're changing all the norms, you're challenging this status quo, and you're trying to do something which is really different in any sense? It can be in an organizational level. It can also be at a startup level where you're kind of creating a startup which will change the dynamic of how you view, let's say, financing, for example. So fintech startups, someone who is working in the healthcare space, for example, can have that also. So we'll discuss that when we get to the essays, but that's the idea. Like, what kind of a change maker are you? Innovative ideas. That's the second keyword. How exactly are you innovative? But when we go through all the M7s, innovation is actually pretty much a repetitive keyword. So innovation has to be there some way or the other. So how creative are you? Are you coming up with some ideas that others can't come up with? That's innovation. So are you coming up with something that others cannot come up with? That is actually a good attribute to have in these days in the business world. So that's innovative. Expanding mindset. This is something Stanford has also discussed on their website. So if you're someone whose mindset is such that you're able to influence a good group of people and you're able to give them diverse perspectives, you're also able to take some opinions of theirs, like, and think big together. So that's like expanding your mindset. More details are also available on the Stanford's website, but like how expansive your mindset can be. That's how Stanford wants your experience to be shaped. But if you have an example from the past, that's even better. Conviction, because obviously you need to have some conviction when you're being a change maker. So how convinced are you that you're someone who can bring that change to the world? Challenge conventions, like we discussed in the change maker. A change maker obviously challenges convention, because if the change maker is following conventions and not causing any change, that's just a status quo person. So that's not change maker. So obviously those two go hand in hand. Principal leader, someone who has this attribute of how Stanford defines its leader. So if you look at their website, there is a whole paragraph on expanding mindset principal leaders. So what exactly do they mean by that? And what exactly comes to your mind when they explain those terms to you? So principal leaders, according to Stanford. So if there are some stories that pop in your head when you listen to these keywords, that's great. Some other keywords again, like someone who's bold. Obviously, change makers have to be bold because if you're someone who is too shy or too timid to make a change, the change may actually never see fruition. So someone who's bold, someone who has empathy. Empathy means that you can understand what the other person thinks. It doesn't necessarily mean you're sympathetic towards them. All right. So empathy is one thing. Then we have unbound. You're not bound by the ideas you're isolated with. You think beyond the convention, so you think outside the box. That's what unbound means in a way. Grit is something that every change maker requires because change requires some level of patience, and you need to have that resilience that when things get rough, you don't really just shy away. That brings me to the purpose, that you have to be someone who is purpose driven, someone who has seen what he wants to do in life or she wants to do in life, or any other pronouns you want to use, and what exactly do you see yourself doing 10 years from now, and how exactly do you see it providing value to the world and also to Stanford. So that's purpose driven. Someone who's a learner, obviously, it's a school, so they want learners. Someone with a growth mindset, that's good. Growth mindset's definition changes, by the way, with schools, with conventions. So understand what growth mindset means for the particular school, not growth mindset altogether, because I could say a couple of words and just put that in the growth mindset, and it's not even growth mindset. So, like, it's Stanford specific. Ethical obviously goes without saying. You're someone who can act with integrity and you can follow your word. That's basically what it means. So those were the keywords. Now we'll be getting into the essays directly. And the first essay, as you must have already seen on the school's website, is the purpose essay, which has remained pretty much the same for quite some time now. So what matters most to you and why? If you think about the keywords, like I said, keywords are the basis on which your applications will be created. So if you think about this, this is more like a purpose-driven thing. They want to see what your purpose is in life and in general. So the biggest mistake I've seen people make in this essay is simple, that they are actually just going to talk about their personal life. They're going to speak about like the family is one thing that matters most to me. I want to provide for my family. I want to take care of them, etc., etc. It's all good. Nothing wrong with that. Except that's not a Stanford essay. Stanford is a business school ultimately, the graduate school of business. So how exactly will you be conveying what matters most to you in a way that makes more sense? So you have to convey your professional purpose, which means your long-term goals. And that's what matters most to you. And how exactly will you be pursuing those goals and what exactly leads you to that particular purpose? All right. So if you're someone who, let's say, wants to be a CEO of some healthcare company, so why do you want to be a CEO of a healthcare tech company? You could be so many things. Stanford has all the resources available, and Stanford is one of the few schools that has a website dedicated to the alums, without whom certain things will not exist in the world. So Stanford really prizes itself on its entrepreneurship, that people have been able to create a change in the world. So why exactly do you want to be a healthcare tech CEO? So maybe let's say I'll take an example from the past. In the past, I came across someone who saw a death in the family because his own brother actually passed away because of certain issues in the healthcare system. So the system was at fault. It was not just the disease that took the life of the person, but that kind of had an impact on him personally when he was working. Let's say, like, I think it was around like when he was working in tech, and that affected him. That became his motivation, that I could actually become someone who can change this entire system by leveraging my technical expertise. And at the same time, I can gain the business skills from Stanford. I want to change the system for good. And I want to. So someone from the technology industry wants to go in the healthcare space specifically just because the system was the problem for them. And now this is becoming the motivation for their long-term goal, that the long term goal is to fix the healthcare system. The motivation behind that is that I lost someone, and that impacted me deeply because I saw what exactly is wrong with the system and I want to change that. So that's the motivation and that's the long-term goal, and that's what matters to this person, and they have dedicated their entire life to this. All right, so this is just an example. Motivation can be stronger or weaker depending on how you want to take this. So my suggestion is just to make sure that you find your motivation, which is more personal to you. And it's fine to be vulnerable in the motivation side, so long as you are not really just violating the whole idea of what exactly does it mean to be motivated uh, in a business school sense. So it made no sense what I said in the end, but the idea is to make sure that your motivation is good enough. To answer this question now, how exactly should you be answering this question? Okay, so there are two approaches I recommend. So the first one is the top-down approach, and the second one is the bottom-up approach. What do I mean by that? So let's take the top-down approach first. By top-down approach, I mean you show goals and your motivation first. So remember the example I gave you? The long-term goal, what matters most to this person is to fix the healthcare system and the inequities that exist that caused a certain issue, which led to a very tragic event in their life. So that is basically the what matters most to them, so that it doesn't have to happen to anyone else and no one else has to lose their brother like that. So that's the motivation, and sorry, so that's the goal. And then they convey the motivation. So this is what happened, which is why I have this motivation. And then show the life events as a prequel to this particular event, that over the career case of my life, or like the over the time, I have gained these and these skills, and I have been involved with technology industry. I have done this. I have been an undergrad student where I also participated in this, so I probably have some transferable skills. It's fine to go around that, and you're giving them a series of life events that will give them the idea of what exactly is your purpose in life and how exactly did you get to this point where you're applying to Stanford. So that's one of the ways to handle this. And this top-down approach is very good for people who have recently found their motivation. So that's basically the idea. And then there's the bottom-up approach, which is actually good for people whose life has been leading them to this point. So none of them is better than the other. It's just that the bottom-up approach takes a very sequential approach where you are actually bringing the other person to this point where all the events of the life are actually pointing in this direction. So many people try to cleverly craft their stories around it. It makes no sense because they had to follow the top-down approach. So depending on your own situation, how you follow this approach is up to you. So in bottom-up approach, you just go in the reverse side where you start with your life's events. Where exactly was your canon event that kind of set the course of the action towards Stanford? And then you build up to your goals and motivation. So after realizing all of that stuff, you have realized that this is your goal in life, this is your purpose in life, and this is what your motivation is to pursue that purpose in life. So that's basically how you answer this question. This is how you structure that answer. And I think the word limit is about 650 on this. So make sure that you're saving the space, but showing the keywords specifically of what Stanford is actually looking for in its candidates. Second question is an alignment question of a sort. Why exactly do you want to be at Stanford? So if you want to be at Stanford, why do you want to be there? Who are you as a person? All of those things matter in this question. So simple, just pick one resource which is unique to you. So let's take an example of the same person that we were speaking about just now. So the person who wants to be in the healthcare tech space, they probably will choose, let's say, the Entrepreneurship Center as a resource. So, how exactly is the Entrepreneurship Center different at Stanford? Because almost all the M7s and many of the top 15s have the Entrepreneurship Center at their disposal. So, what's so special about that resource at Stanford? And you will only learn about these resources when you start speaking with the students, that what is so specific about them that is more relevant to your goals. So similarly, for the healthcare tech side, maybe there are some speakers coming who are the specifically investing in people who want to build in healthcare tech space. They have a network in venture capital and private equity companies who are constantly coming and taking in the students. Maybe there are some people who have already been funded in the past who are Stanford alums. Those kinds of introductions can be made through Stanford. So if you think that is unique, you try to see what other schools have that resource and try to make it even more specific and become more and more Stanford specific. So that's basically the idea. Like, how exactly are the keywords aligned with Stanford's keywords? How exactly are the resources unique to you and also to Stanford? So that's basically the way you have to play this game. The other thing is that you have to highlight the why of that resource. So why exactly is that resource important to you? So there's an entrepreneurship center. Great. So what's so special about it? Why do you need that center? Obviously, you're going to say that I want to start a company, so I'll need the entrepreneurship center. That's not a very convincing argument, is it? So you ask them, maybe this resource is useful to you because of the connections you'll make there. Okay, what kinds of connections? Then you probably talk about the investors, maybe, or maybe the other entrepreneurs. Maybe you'll talk about certain pitching events. Maybe you'll talk about certain accelerator program. Maybe you'll talk about some incubators in the Bay Area. So all those things come into your mind. Like, why exactly is this resource so specifically important to me personally? So that's the why of why that resource is important to you, and that is unique to you. So that's basically the idea. So now, right now, you're just being a little more selfish that I'll be at Stanford because I want to utilize a particular resource. This resource is important to me for XYZ reasons. And then you highlight how exactly will you be utilizing that resource. That if I am to become the healthcare tech CEO sometime in the future, how will I be able to use the accelerator program in a way that fits naturally into what I plan to do post MBA? So when does the accelerator program run? What exactly will be the values provided to you by the accelerator program? And how exactly will you be utilizing the second year in launching your own business? So usually people do this, that over the summer, they are actually building the resource and building on the resource where they'll be utilizing the accelerator or whatever they have available. And then in the second year, they just keep building in stealth mode and then they launch immediately after MBA. So that's another thing. And the thought process here is simple. You don't just have to take, you also have to understand that you have to give back to Stanford also. So Stanford wants you to be someone who will somewhere in the future give to Stanford. So the idea here is to take for the goals and give for the duty. The way to handle this situation, because the word limit will be about 350 words. So the way to answer this question is pretty simple: to just focus on how exactly will you be pursuing the goal and how will you also probably use the skills that you already have to help others start their own companies while you're in the entrepreneurship center. So that's the idea behind the alignment essay, where you're trying to show them what resource is unique to you. And like I said, it only has to be one resource. Why did I say one resource and not multiple resources? Is because they're not looking for someone who is going to just give them a list of things that they will be doing without giving a proper rationale for why exactly is that resource important. How do you plan to use that? It's not going to be very impactful if you just list down the things. That's one of the red flags that Stanford sees in these essays, is that people will just say, like, I'll be using the entrepreneurship center, I'll be using the entrepreneurship club, I'll also be connecting with the private equity and venture capital guys, I'll probably join the Stanford Angels and Entrepreneurs Network. There's too many things there. So the why is important and the how is also important. And when you start saying these why and how, and who told you about these resources is also important. So when you use all of these things, it automatically gets, covered within the 300 word limit. So that's basically the idea here, that you need to contain yourself, and I'll utilize this resource X way and I'll give back to the people in Y way. So that's basically the idea, towards the goal and back to the community. Now there is an essay zero. I won't say it's an essay number three because there are three examples that you have to give 200 words each. So if you can think about a time in the past 5 years where you have done something which has maybe changed the life or changed an organization, You have to give an example of that, and they have given you a very clear idea of how exactly you should be talking about this. What was the situation? The more dramatic the situation, the better your story looks. What exactly did you do? So, how exactly did you step in, solve the problem, change the status quo, or challenge the status quo, and be the change maker that you are? And what was exactly the impact of that on the lives of the people that you have actually tried to touch? So, simply speaking, thinking about a time in the last 5 years where you've created a positive impact is pretty straightforward way of saying that. Just give us examples of when you have been change maker, a change maker. So like in professional life, even in extracurriculars. So if you, let's say, work for a non-profit, and if they had some dated systems which were causing problems to them, and you're the one who is the problem solver who stepped in and decided that you will change that system and kind of make things streamlined and make it even more efficient, that will allow them to have a greater impact on whatever cause the nonprofit is serving. That's basically the idea here. And if you can quantify the impact, that's even better, because quantified impact looks much more influential compared to many other things. So that's the impact essay. And there are three examples for that. So I would definitely encourage you to utilize this space, because while it is optional, I think you can't be privileged enough to have more space to talk about the things that you have done in the past. I definitely think that this should be used. Moving on, we have the resume, and we'll go through this section fairly quickly. So just remember that for resume, you actually need a resume in front of you to explain what exactly is happening. But if you have a resume which like probably resembles what we are about to tell you, that's great. But if there is a little bit of a difference, you try to change what exactly is on your resume. All right. Okay. So we'll go with the acronym FCQBG, and let's see what that acronym means. So we start with F, which stands for format. So your resume obviously needs you to have some important sections like your name, email address, phone number, and if possible, your LinkedIn profile link on the top. This is usually followed by like the education section, employment section, and extracurriculars or other activities. There is no specific format according to the admissions team, but I still believe that only the most important section should be kept. The space is limited and you only have like one page, so use it carefully. Education section must list your bachelor's and or master's degrees, and a very short bullet on what exactly your extracurriculars were during your time there. So when you write your education, just in a small bullet point, just show them what extracurriculars you were involved in, not too much academic stuff. The purpose of this section, the bullet point that I'm talking about, is only to see if you will be involved in a similar capacity in the business school. So if you're saying that in my undergrad experience, I was involved in a particular club, I led that club, and we kind of changed certain things in that club. We were the change makers of that place. So what exactly was that change? And the business school will be able to see that alignment. So be intentional about this. If you ever attended a business school session, you must know that they say that the past activities are a great reflection of your future. So that's what matters. I got a lot of questions about how to write your employment if you're also a part-time business owner. It is perfectly fine to create a separate section, and you can distribute that where you can write down work experience in one section and entrepreneurial experience in other section. Completely all right with that. It is also fine. So I have already ensured to show that in the sample, so you can see that when you get the samples, and those will be shared with you in the Q&A group. The C stands for consistency. And by consistency, I mean the consistency in the format of your resume's bullet points. The most popular industry format is the PARS format, which stands for problem, action, results, and skills used. As the acronym already suggests, you start by defining the problem you're trying to solve. Maybe it's marketing, engineering, whatever your function is, and whatever problem you're trying to solve to help that business succeed that you're trying to serve. Move on to define the actions you took to address it and what results came out of that and what skills you used. So that's basically a very simple way of saying that. Focus on the people skills that you used in the scenario because that's what matters. Your leadership skills, I mean. And then you have the PAR format, which is basically just parse format with skills removed. It helps shorten the bullet, but the skills are blended into the actions. So that's PAR format. RAS format stands for results, actions, and skills, where putting results helps you make the impact come first. And in case someone is skimming through your resume, they can get surprised as to how you managed to do that and makes them even more curious. There is no preference for one over the other, but I must tell you not to mix them all in one resume. Only one consistent bullet format should be used per resume. That should be parse, PAR, or RAS, or not and. So just use one for one resume. Moving on, we have the quantification, which is most heard of in the MBA admissions industry. Your bullets need to be well quantified, while quantification is usually more or less mandatory in the impact. It would not hurt to mention the size of the team you led for the particular incident to further make the bullets more powerful. If you think you don't know how to quantify the bullet, it's completely fine. Just think about why you exist in the organization first. Even if that doesn't work out, then think in the direction that what exactly is the money they are making out of you. And the thoughts will start popping up. How exactly is my business using me? How exactly is my company trying to use me? So that's the way you have to think, and things will start popping up in your head. As it says on the slide, you can highlight operational efficiency, revenue increase, sales, etc., with the numbers, percentage, cash, whatever, depending on what you did. Just remember that you need to enter the currency of the country that you're applying to. So in this case, it would be US dollars. I can understand that because of the purchasing power parity or the exchange rate difference, the converted amount may look smaller in dollars. So you can accompany this with a percentage change so that it can look like an impact, that the impact was big enough. And they do understand what exactly is like the exchange rate difference and how exactly to convert that. So how exactly was it big for you? That's basically what matters. B stands for branding. And as I usually say, and it's right there on the page also, a hero can rarely be a sage, and a sage can rarely be a rebel. All three have different personalities. A hero is someone who steps in, takes the responsibility for the people, and solves their problems to rally people behind him. A sage is someone who shares his wisdom and helps people solve problems. People rally behind them because of their intelligence. A rebel is someone that disrupts the status quo by creating something completely different from what used to be, and their rebellious attitude and uniqueness attracts people who rally behind them because they were too frustrated with the status quo. So that's basically the idea that like all the people like are following a hero, a sage, and a rebel, but they have different personalities. So your brand needs to stay consistent across essays, resumes, and LOR, and your people skills do matter. So what do I mean by that? Let's take an example. So you're working for a company where you've asked your supervisor to give you a letter of recommendation. And the supervisor has given you a glowing letter of recommendation, very positive. Everything is perfect in that, except for one thing, that is your personal brand. That maybe the supervisor has just said that you're someone who is so knowledgeable that people are actually inclined to be with you because of your knowledge and wisdom. So that's a sage quality. And now, just because you want to fit yourself with Stanford, you will probably make yourself look like a rebel in the essays. And that is exactly where the mismatch happens. And Stanford has the lowest acceptance rate of most of the schools that are there in the US. So you can understand that once you have said something that I am someone who is a what do you say? Like I'm someone who is basically a rebel, but the profile says something else in the LOR. Your application may get rejected because there is a misalignment of the brand of what exactly you are as a person. That is why I usually suggest people to create unique resumes, unique essays, and unique LORs, at least for the top 15 schools, because it will be very important. There are some overlapping qualities, and there is a possibility that you can create a similar LOR and resume, but essays will still have to, complement the resume and LOR. So always create a new one. The G stands for goals, and perhaps the most overlooked part, forgetting that your resume needs to contain the transferable skills more relevant to your post MBA goals. Here's how you can modify your resume to meet those requirements. First, take the industry. Let's assume it's consulting. Then you have to take the function. So here we have the associate function post MBA. Then the target company. Let's say it's McKinsey, which could be in school's feeder location, which may be San Francisco even. So that's basically the idea, that you have narrowed down what exactly your goal is going to be. Once you have this information, you can look up on the internet the job description, and you will likely find it on the website. And you can pick out the key skills from the job description and see if your bullets match those and plug the key skills in. The better way of dealing this is to use the Gen AI tools and let them give you the overlapping keywords. I'm not saying you have to use generative AI to create the application. I'm just saying that you're using generative AI only to find the overlap between the skills that you have in your bullets and the skills that are required for the particular job description you want to have in the future. So you're using AI as a tool, but not to create resume bullets. So that way you kind of save your time and also get what exactly you need from that. And those were the essays and resume. And here we are at the end of this session. Here's a little news for you before we move on to the Q&A and samples. MBA Times is offering the Hail Mary service at the discount of 50%. You will only have to pay $250 per school to get personalized one-time feedback on your whole application, from resumes and essays to extracurriculars. So the whole application or holistic feedback, just because you attended the session and you were registered. So at $250 per school. You can use the code Stanford Mega Fair 2025 to avail the offer. There are also bulk discounts available should you choose to opt in for it. You can always scan the QR code and go to the page for requesting that. The website will have an option to select the number of schools. So if you want to get the bulk discount, that will always be an option. If you don't want to scan the QR code, you can also visit MBA Times by going to www.mba-times.com/code to request the code yourself. So this was the session for the day, and we will have the recording available for a couple of hours before this becomes private. So if you want to take a screenshot of this, by all means, go ahead. And let me just share the Q&A session QR code with you again. So this is the QR code for Stanford's WhatsApp group for all the Q&A that you might, like all the questions that you might have popping up in your head. So I'll see you in the Stanford's WhatsApp group. If you have any questions, by all means, post there. The next session that we have will be hosted soon, and you'll be informed about that in the announcement channel. So thank you so much for joining. I'll end the stream now.